A homeless man sits quietly on a train, minding his own business. The calm atmosphere is disrupted when a group of young troublemakers enters the carriage. They bump into two other passengers, making it obvious they're looking to start something. One passenger attempts to intimidate them by showing a gun, but the group's leader, Anton, remains unfazed. Instead, Anton and his gang manage to scare the armed passenger into backing off after hinting at their plans to move weapons later that week. Spotting the homeless man, Anton decides it's a good time to mess around. He tries to snatch the man's alcohol, but the homeless man grabs his hand with surprising strength. This is no ordinary vagrant. His name is John Reese, and he's a former special agent with a dangerous past. Anton tries to yank his hand free, but John holds firm before eventually letting go. Undeterred, Anton mocks him, joking that John didn't bring enough alcohol for the group. The gang has no idea who they're dealing with and attempts to corner him. John acts swiftly, taking down the thugs with precision-breaking hands, striking sensitive areas and targeting their throats just enough to leave them gasping. After the fight, all 5 troublemakers are taken into police custody. At the station, Officer Carter reviews footage of the altercation before heading to the room where John is being held. She jokes with him, suggesting he should have landed a few more punches on the gang. Despite her attempts at conversation, John remains silent. Determined to learn more about him, Carter offers John a cup of water. She subtly ensures her fingerprints don't contaminate the cup, holding it in an unusual way. Excusing herself, she hands the cup over to forensics, who scan it for prints and run it through their database. They uncover John's true identity, a man with a history tied to multiple crime scenes and for active arrest warrants spanning different countries. John clearly has a complicated past. Carter would like to dig deeper, but her chance is cut short when a mysterious lawyer arrives and secures John's release. The lawyer escorts John to his employer, Harold Finch. Finch, a wealthy man with access to vast amounts of information, seems to know everything about John's troubled history. He's also aware that John has been drowning in despair, trying to drink himself into oblivion. Finch claims to offer what John desperately needs: a purpose and a job. Finch takes John to the heart of New York City, sharing a grim statistic. Someone dies in the city every 18 hours, but Finch proposes they can change that. He reveals he has a list of individuals connected to upcoming crimes, although the list doesn't specify whether these people will be victims or perpetrators. He asks John to investigate a woman named Hanson, whose name has appeared on the list, to determine what will happen and prevent a tragedy. John dismisses Finch's proposal, believing he's just a wealthy man stalking an ex. As he walks away, Finch's men try to stop him, but John easily overpowers them. Later, John retreats to a hotel to clean himself up and alter his appearance. That night, Finch contacts him again, playing an audio recording of a murder that occurred 3 years ago in the very room next to John's. Finch taunts John, adding that he was also too late to save someone named Jessica, a woman John clearly cared about deeply. Although furious, John realizes the truth in Finch's words. This loss has haunted him, and the chance to save others offers him a sense of redemption. Convinced, John agrees to work with Finch. Finch leads him to his base of operations, revealing that his list contains not names, but social security numbers tied to those potentially involved in crimes. John begins his investigation by narrowing down the suspects who might want to harm Hanson. He identifies two possible enemies: Wheeler, her co-counsel and ex-boyfriend, whom she broke up with, and Pope, a gangster she helped send to prison. To gather more information, John attends Pope's trial, where Detective Fusco provides testimony. After the trial, Hanson confronts Fusco, upset that he deviated from the agreed-upon testimony. Later, Hanson visits Pope in prison and tells him she doesn't believe he's guilty of the crime he's been accused of. Through a microphone John planted in Hanson's phone, he learns that Pope is protecting his younger brother, Michael. Pope seems to be lying about a murder he didn't commit to shield Michael, who witnessed the real killers in action. The next day, Wheeler searches Hanson's computer, looking for information about Michael. This makes John suspect Wheeler is involved. That night, Michael becomes a target, but John intervenes just in time, using a grenade launcher to disable the attacker's truck. John rescues Michael and confiscates badges from the attackers, revealing them to be corrupt cops. As John monitors the situation, he discovers that these dirty cops are collaborating with Fusco. Their operation involves killing witnesses to silence them, while Fusco ensures innocent people take the fall. John demands answers from Finch about the mysterious list. Finch explains that after 9/11, he was contracted by the government to build a machine that analyzes data from cameras, microphones, and other sources nationwide. The machine produces two lists, one for potential terrorist threats and another for ordinary crimes. Finch secretly accesses the second list, which only provides social security numbers, leaving him and John to investigate further. John continues to watch over Hansen, believing she's in danger. However, he soon discovers she's working with the corrupt cops and orchestrated Pope's murder in his cell. Hansen orders them to kill Wheeler as well, fearing he's digging too deeply. While John surveils Hansen, Fusco ambushes him and tries to eliminate him in a remote location. However, John escapes and returns to New York, just as the dirty cops are about to kill Wheeler and frame someone else for the crime. John intervenes. He takes down the corrupt officers and uses recorded evidence to expose Hansen's involvement. Finally, John blackmails Fusco into becoming his informant within the police force, ensuring he has someone on the inside. A few days later, John encounters a man named Bill in an elevator. Noticing the flowers Bill is holding, John comments on how some women leave their partners after discovering infidelity, while others hire hitmen to stage an accident. John quickly neutralizes two men following Bill and advises him to contact a good divorce lawyer. The next day, the machine assigns Finch and John a new number. This time, it belongs to a girl named Teresa, whose case is unusual. Finch takes John to a cemetery, explaining that Teresa is supposed to be dead. Her father, a real estate developer, went bankrupt during a market crash, lost his sanity, and allegedly killed his entire family before taking his own life. However, the machine's intel suggests Teresa is still alive. John consults Fusco to retrieve the case file, leaving Fusco no choice but to comply. After reviewing the details, John concludes that the supposed family murder-suicide was actually a professional hit designed to look like the father was responsible. Finch is intrigued by John's knowledge, and John explains that this is exactly how he would stage such a crime. Using advanced tracking tools, Finch locates Teresa's whereabouts. John pursues her, but Teresa, aware she's being followed, escapes before John can approach her. Later, John meets Finch at an office where Finch is revealed to be the owner of a major company, using his position to blend into the background. John also hands Finch a small device Teresa left behind, which is capable of stealing card information from ATMs. John uncovers that Teresa has been making a living by stealing card information and withdrawing cash. While tracking her case, he investigates the hitman who targeted her family. John learns that a man nicknamed Soul Nick was the hired killer, now imprisoned for an unrelated crime. John visits Soul Nick in jail and questions him. The hitman admits he has a code against harming children, which is why he spared Teresa. He threatened her into silence instead when pressed for details about who hired him. Soul Nick reveals that he was paid in cash by an anonymous man, leaving no trail. Meanwhile, Teresa tries to sell stolen banking information online, allowing Finch to track her activity. John finds her, but an assassin interrupts their meeting. John rescues Teresa and takes her to a hotel for safety. There, Teresa reveals that her father believed his brother, Derek, was behind his downfall. John follows this lead and discovers that Derek conspired with two wealthy contractors to murder his brother for the land, which has since skyrocketed in value. Now, they are targeting Teresa to prevent her from inheriting the land if her survival becomes public knowledge. John tracks down one of the contractors and uses a large truck to crush his car, forcing a confrontation. The contractor confesses that the hit on Teresa is already underway. Back at the hotel, the assassin locates Teresa. As Finch tries to help her escape via the fire escape, the assassin corners them. John arrives just in time and kills the assassin, saving Teresa once again. The next day, John contacts Agent Carter and arranges for Teresa to be delivered to her aunt. Carter brings backup, but only finds Teresa. When questioned at the police station, Teresa claims to have forgotten critical details about her ordeal, likely due to trauma. John later visits Finch, but finds that he has relocated his office. When John calls, Finch reminds him of his preference for privacy, stating that he will initiate contact when necessary. Their respite is short-lived as the machine produces another number, belonging to Joey, a decorated military veteran now working as a groom at a hotel. John begins surveilling Joey and notices strange behavior. Joey sends a cryptic message before leaving work to participate in a bank robbery with a masked accomplice. John, unable to intervene during the robbery, stops the security guard from escalating the situation. Finch suggests turning Joey over to the authorities, but John decides to dig deeper into how a once honorable soldier became a criminal. His investigation uncovers a network of ex-soldiers conducting robberies. Posing as someone seeking high-paying, dangerous work, John approaches Sam, a former sergeant who appears to lead the group. John fabricates a story about a mutual connection and gains Sam's trust. Finch orchestrates the arrest of the team's driver, creating an opening for John to infiltrate the crew. John meets Joey and his team under this guise. Meanwhile, Carter reviews the bank footage and notices John saving the security guard, raising her suspicions. As John gets closer to Joey, he observes that Joey doesn't fit the profile of someone who would harm innocent people. John befriends Joey, pretending to meet him randomly and engaging in conversations about their work. Joey explains that their actions depend on Sam's orders. Their bond strengthens when they fend off two aggressive bankers in a fight. John begins to question Joey about his personal life, suspecting that the soldier's actions are tied to deeper motivations. Joey remains guarded, but hints at obligations he must fulfill. John learns that Joey is connected to two women, his girlfriend and the wife of a former war buddy. The latter has a young daughter, and Joey is committed to securing her financial future, as her mother recently had a baby. A few days later, the gang recruits John for another mission. Meanwhile, the police identify one of the gang members. The crew successfully robs an underground gambling den owned by the mafia, escaping just before law enforcement arrives. Sam, the gang's leader, begins preparing for their next job, but Finch urges John to intervene, believing it's time to dismantle the group. John requests more time, determined to protect Joey. John discovers the gang's next heist involves stealing case files tied to someone named Elias. Finch uncovers that Sam plans to betray the team. During the mission, Sam executes the gang members after obtaining the files, but John saves Joey in the nick of time, advising him to leave town. Later, Sam delivers the stolen files to an unknown party, but John finds Sam already dead when he arrives to confront him. Amidst the chaos, Finch visits a doctor for his back pain, but has an ulterior motive. He steals the hospital radio belonging to Dr. Tillman, whose number the machine has flagged. While surveilling her, John notices that Dr. Tillman leads a solitary life, dedicating herself entirely to work. One night, she visits a club, where a man flirts with her. John intervenes, but inside the club, he spots Andrew, a banker who had earlier bumped into Tillman. Suspicious, John bumps into Andrew and discovers he is carrying drugs. The bartender reveals that Dr. Tillman frequents the club alone, likely catching Andrew's attention. John breaks into Andrew's apartment and, with Finch's help, examines his files. They uncover that Andrew is a predator with a criminal record that was expunged. He has a history of exploiting women, including a college incident where he was accused of sexual assault. The charges were dropped, but the victim, Tillman's sister, later died of a drug overdose. John realizes that Tillman is seeking revenge, and the machine flagged her because she plans to kill Andrew. While Carter reviews footage of the gang's heist, she notices an interaction between Finch and one of the robbers. Finch deflects her questions with a fabricated story. Meanwhile, John watches as Tillman stalks Andrew, confirming that she is the hunter, not the prey. Fusco retrieves Andrew's old file, revealing the connection to Tillman's sister. John learns that Tillman has acquired chemicals to dissolve Andrew's body after killing him. To prevent her from going through with her plan, John stages an accident involving Andrew's car, loading it with drugs. The police arrest Andrew, but he is released the next day due to his wealth and legal influence. That night, Tillman breaks into Andrew's apartment, drugs him, and transports him in a wheelchair to her van. John steps in and tells Tillman to sit with him, as he knows exactly who she's taking to the back of her van. Andrew, who's tied up back there. John manages to convince her not to kill Andrew, explaining that if she does, she loses the most important part of herself. Tillman isn't a killer, she's someone who helps others. John then takes Andrew to a remote location, and the two begin a deep conversation. John struggles with whether to let Andrew live, wondering if people can change, or if they remain the same. He questions whether there are genuinely good people left, or just good choices to make. He also reflects on whether he'll regret sparing Andrew's life or ending it. Ultimately, John asks Andrew to help him make the right decision, and the scene fades to black. A few days later, the machine provides Finch with a new social security number, belonging to Samuel Gates, a judge at the Supreme Court known for his fairness. Samuel is tough on crime and has reportedly made plenty of enemies. John begins to follow him and soon realizes that several individuals are after the judge. One of them is about to act, so John prepares for a confrontation. However, when he sees the man pull out his phone, send a message, and toss it into a dumpster, John retrieves it and reads a message about Samuel's son graduating from school. John mutters, "I think we've been following the wrong Samuel Gates." At the same time, a group of kidnappers attempts to abduct Samuel's son. John steps in and fights them off, but one of the men shoots him, knocking him unconscious while the kidnappers take the boy. Later, Samuel receives a call from the kidnappers, who inform him that they have his son. They demand that he waits for further instructions and warns him not to alert anyone. Devastated, Samuel is approached by John, who explains that the kidnappers will keep his son alive as long as he remains useful. When Samuel asks who John is, he simply says he's someone trying to help. Together, they head to the judge's house, where Samuel questions how the kidnappers bypassed his security system. John tells him to wait for another call from the kidnappers while he checks on the nanny. During this time, John talks to Finch, who's attempting to trace the call the kidnappers made, but can't make progress just yet. Meanwhile, John discovers that the nanny is dead, likely killed by the kidnappers, who probably extracted the alarm code from her. Later, Finch helps John track down one of the kidnappers he had seen earlier. John confronts the man, beats him, and discovers a tattoo on his chest, a symbol of a gang called SP9, originally from Eastern Europe. This gang has somehow expanded into New York. That night, the kidnappers call Samuel again, and it becomes clear that they're not after money. Instead, they want Samuel to dismiss the case of a woman named Angela. If Samuel complies, they'll release his son. When the call ends, Samuel explains that Angela's case is straightforward. She ran over a person and left him for dead. Meanwhile, Finch uncovers that the SP9 gang has grown into a major international network with operations in 18 countries. The next day, Samuel is faced with ruling on Angela's case. He tries to delay making a decision, stalling for time. The gang's leader calls him, urging him to stop dragging things out. But Samuel insists on doing things the right way. Meanwhile, John, having interrogated the man he captured, learns the location where the gang members go to collect their payment. John visits the location and discovers $500,000, after which he fights off to guards protecting the money. Finch listens in on Angela's phone call with the gang leader and pieces things together. Angela works at a bank that has developed software capable of spotting money laundering. However, she has the ability to disable it with a simple click, suggesting that she's collaborating with the gang leader to launder money. The gang uses online payment methods to handle their expenses, including payments for services like lawyers. The next day, Finch poses as an employee at the bank and steals some crucial data from the servers. Meanwhile, John is still trying to track down Samuel's son, but discovers the boy isn't where he expected. With no news of his son, the judge is left with no choice but to drop all charges against Angela, declaring her not guilty. Shortly afterward, the gang leader calls Samuel and tells him to pick up his son, but John realizes the real plan. They're going to kill the judge. When Samuel arrives at the designated location, the bad guys order him to say goodbye to his son, but John intervenes with Angela. He reveals that Angela turns off the bank's algorithm for 3 minutes each morning, allowing the gang to conduct their illegal transactions undetected. The gang leader, realizing that their operation is exposed, orders his men to eliminate everyone involved. This leads to a violent shootout, but the bad guys are ultimately defeated. Finch then provides crucial evidence to a lawyer, ensuring that Angela will be sent to prison while the NYPD finds her tied up with the gang members. Meanwhile, John, disguised as a driver, meets Zoe Morgan, the next person the machine identifies. Zoe is suspicious, so she calls the company to verify if John is really her new driver. Finch answers the phone and confirms John's story. John drives Zoe to a location where she meets a man and purchases a gun. Back at her apartment, Finch discovers another firearm, and John notes that the second gun is untraceable. Zoe changes clothes, and John follows her to an event, suspecting that she might be involved in something criminal. At the event, Zoe meets with a high-ranking police officer and hands him the gun, explaining that she retrieved it after the officer lost it. John drives Zoe back home, and she tells him to meet her the following day. When Finch asks John what's going on, John theorizes that Zoe is a fixer, someone who does favors for money, and in her line of work, many people could want her dead. In the meantime, The police discover the body of a man once suspected in a case involving a woman named Marlene Elias. The case file, which was stolen earlier, belonged to her. Carter speaks with a detective who worked the case, revealing that Marlene was a waitress involved with a mafia boss. The boss, tired of her, hired a killer to silence her, and the case was covered up. Marlene and the boss had a son who might have been behind the theft of the case file and the killing of the main suspect. Zoe soon finds herself in trouble with Mark Lawson, an heir to a large pharmaceutical company. Mark had her retrieve a recording of his illicit affair, and after killing the reporter who had the recording, he now wants to eliminate Zoe to cover his tracks. John steps in to protect her while Finch, posing as a major shareholder, meets with Mark. Finch's investigation uncovers that Mark not only had an affair with the woman, but also murdered her to prevent her from exposing a huge scandal about one of the company's drugs. John and Zoe break into the pharmaceutical company's headquarters to recover deleted files from the main computer. Finch compiles the information and discovers that the company's new drug has a mortality rate of 3%, meaning 6 out of every 200 people who take it die. The company had tested the drug on several people, all of whom died, but they likely bribed the authorities to keep it under wraps and gain approval for the drug. Unfortunately, John and Zoe are caught, tied up, and left at the mercy of Mark. Before he can kill them, Zoe tells him she has emailed the report to someone she trusts. Mark negotiates with her, agreeing to spare her life if she takes him to the person who has the report. As they prepare to leave, Zoe secretly slips a paper clip into John's hand. John uses it to free himself, kills the guard watching him, and tracks down Zoe to save her. With the information now in the public eye, the pharmaceutical company is shut down and held accountable for its crimes. As they part ways, John warns Zoe to stay out of trouble, but she replies that staying out of trouble is not an option for her. So, this is the conclude of this story, but don't forget to like and subscribe to Cine Recaps for more cool videos.